Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome. I just need to figure out something because, okay, I think I'm sorted. Oopsie. Can I just check something? Can you tell me whether you can hear this thing I want to play? Now it's telling me to install something, but we'll...
Hi, Sean. So the incident we
Was that audible? Did anybody hear that voice note?
Hi, Sean. That was I heard it on my side.
You did? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Because now it's telling me to install something or blah, blah, blah. You know, more Zoom changes things all the time. So if you heard it, then I assume, Robin said she heard it too, so good. It's getting all the way to Gauteng. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. I see we have some of our new members have joined us. My marketing seems to be working. We're getting quite a few new members, which is exciting. So if you're here for the first time, good morning and welcome to the family. We're happy to have you on board. The more, the merrier, to be honest. So everything's going really well. So, ladies and gentlemen, because we have new members and because I forget that people don't all know Ishmael. Ishmael, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Happy to be here.
Ishmael is the director of MML Inc. I have to remember that in my head because I think I still send my emails to the wrong email address. I must update it. And he specializes in rental law. Is that how we say it?
Correct.
Okay. So everybody, good morning. This morning we are going to be dealing with a case study that Ishmael and I were involved in, me to a very small extent, because it was above my pay grade. It got very, very complicated and I wasn't quite sure what the answers were. So I passed it on to Ishmael. By the way, just so that those that are new know, if you have any problems, any concerns, any questions, you are welcome to WhatsApp me. I think my WhatsApp is in the welcome emails you would have received. And you can just pop me a voice note or a WhatsApp at any point in time, and I will get back to you as far as possible. So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning, I forgot to share my, I have shared my screen, haven't I? I get confused. Let me just put this one up. There we are. Is my screen shared now?
No.
No. You see, I got so confused with the audio that I forgot to share my screen. Let me find it. There we are. Oh, that's where I was.
Nothing on our side.
Oh, no, you know why? Don't worry. It wants something about some audio device and it won't let me share anything until I install some silly audio device. So we'll live without the screen this morning. But we had a member question in the course of, I think it was this month, wasn't it, Ishmael? Yeah, I think it was earlier this. Yeah. And the member was kind enough to pop me a WhatsApp voice note to explain the situation. So
So the incident we had a couple of weeks ago.
Oopsie, sorry. I'm going to play the voice note now.
So
You can hear it, eh? Yeah. Ishmael?
Yep. Yeah,
okay.
You can hear.
Okie dokie. So I will play this. Hopefully it's loud enough.
Incident we had a couple of weeks ago. It was a normal email rental inquiry. The lady was made to have a look at the place. She said it was for her friend, that he knew the apartments very well. He just sent her to come look at the specific unit. You know, he works during the day. It's not unusual. We've had a couple of requests like that. She said the unit was fine, and then the application process started. We had a completely and legitimately filled in application form. We got legitimate verified 3 months bank statements. We got 3 months pay slips that checked out when cross-referencing them with a bank statement. The credit check was good. Employment was confirmed. However, when it came to the key handover on the day, somebody else was at the unit, somebody else entirely, not the first lady who came to look at the apartment, nor the gentleman whose application we had received. Obviously, we can see what he looks like because we had a copy of his ID. He arrived there with a truck full of furniture, but at this point, obviously, the agent started getting jittery. And she said to him she'll allow him to offload his furniture, but she's not going to give him the keys. The keys must be given to the signatory on the lease. That's when she contacted me and said something fishy is going on, and we started looking at things more in depth. This tenant also made a cash deposit for the deposit and for the rent, which isn't unusual. I mean, we have a few of those, especially in that price bracket of rental. So often people who earn weekly wages or get paid in cash. So at this stage, it wasn't unusual yet, but if you add everything up, it starts looking very fishy. So I phoned, the agent did phone to confirm employment, but I phoned because I wanted to speak to him at his workplace, because now we're starting to think, who is this guy? When I called, they told me that the applicant, yes, he works there. They verified his employment again. Then I asked if I could speak to him, to which the gentleman who answered the phone said, he's going to be busy for 2 to 3 hours today. Can he reach you on the cell? And I said, that's fine. I'll phone back later when he's available, but I need to speak to him at his place of work, because anybody can pick up the phone and confirm employment. But I wanted to speak to him at his, to see whether he's actually in that office. He then said to me, he will call me on the cell number, because I'd phoned him from my cell. And I said, no, I need to speak to him on the landline. To which point the guy put the phone down. About an hour later, I get a call from a number that I don't know. And this is now the applicant. But he's speaking in an accent that doesn't correlate with the ID. That was just a gut feel. But he also had a device that concealed his voice. It changed his voice. It almost made it sound computerized. And then I put him on speakerphone so that somebody else could also just hear the conversation and just hear what I'm hearing. And it was at that point that I knew that this is money laundering. The tenant, in the meantime, contacted the agent and asked what the problem was. And on advice from you, we just said to him that, listen, the lease was approved based on the application you completed. And now that there's another gentleman coming to live with you, he needs to go through the application process as well. So, because he was saying, is this now a problem? And we said, no, it's not. Because, you can't discriminate just on gut feel. So we tried to do a few extra checks. When it came to the point where I said to him, for pickup purposes, please, can you just send me a picture of yourself holding your ID? Because at this point, I knew we were not speaking to the persons whose particulars we had. And that's when he said, no, this is becoming too much. Just refund my money and I'll find somewhere else to live. So I said to him, that's not a problem. You just need to remove your furniture. And the minute you let me know your furniture has been removed, we will release the funds into the same bank account that was provided to us. And that's when he started going off and said, no, there's issues with that bank account and this way and that way. But I knew if I had to report this to FIC, I've only got a legitimate person's details. I've got no details of the person who's putting up this front. So he sent me a bank statement, completely different name. He said it was for his girlfriend, the one who had viewed the apartment and also the one who paid in the cash. So we needed to refund her. When I got the bank statement, it was in the name of a gentleman. But at least now we have a bank statement with proper particulars that we can report to FIC. I also asked him to email me the proof of bank details with instruction to say, I, Mr. So-and-so, give permission for the deposit to be returned to this other person. And when he sent me that mail, he spelled the surname wrong. That's why I also know it wasn't him. So what we think happened here is they scrape listings, put it on other websites, get people to apply, and then use those legitimate documents to try and get into a lease agreement.
That, ladies and gentlemen, I left it totally unedited because this is often what happens. There's lots and lots and lots of details involved in that. The reason I share these things, and normally it's just me summarizing, but we were fortunate that this particular member was happy to send us a voice note. Unfortunately, I can't answer questions about areas and things like that, just because of privacy reasons. So we're doing this anonymously, but I do appreciate that we got this. And I think this is an example of something that could potentially happen to all of us. Certain assumptions were made, obviously, but Ishmael, let's start off with you. There's a lot packed into that 5-minute voice note. And I suppose, yes, there is a lot, but I appreciate that because I think it's good that we have a lot there. So some of the questions that I highlighted that I'll just mention is, what are the legal implications when somebody that we don't know, have never met, arrives, okay, and they're not the movers? Does this mean we can automatically cancel the lease? Is another question. I'm just going to throw out a whole lot of questions, and then we can sort of work our way through them. What do we do immediately to protect our landlord? If clearly these people weren't feeling comfortable, and I think probably for good, well, yeah, in the end for good reason. And how does one try and this is probably a stupid question, but preventative steps for future tenancies. But I also know that it doesn't matter what we try and prevent, somebody gets cleverer all the time. But I mean, I've had a number of clients who've had situations where people have scraped their listings. That much I do know for a fact. And I know of people where they've taken the company's website and duplicated it. So these things happen. There's lots of tools out there. Where do we start with this one?
Okay, Sean, as you say, quite a bit to unpack here. Where do we start? We would start at the beginning. Now, the beginning of this issue comes into effect when the person shows up to take occupation. Because remember, everything prior to that, as far as we know, I mean, up to now, it's still an assumption, but quite a heavy assumption, which I do believe is correct, that this was fraud. Now, the member did mention money laundering, not really, not from a legal point of view, but definitely fraud. So when this application was initially done, fraud was already in place. But we did not know that at the time. As she says, the bank statements checked out, the ID checked out, references, everything was above board. She had no reason to not enter into this lease, had no reason not to accept the deposit and basically hand over the keys. The issue starts when the occupier, I'm not going to call them the tenant, I'm going to call them the occupier. When the occupier shows up to take occupation and it's not the same person. This is where our issue now kicks in.
Sorry, something that she didn't put in the voice note, but which I know is that when they did do the application, the person was asked, the applicant was asked, is anybody else going to cohabitate with you? Are there going to be any other occupants? And they said no. So that wasn't put in the voice note. So
that's fine. That's fine, because obviously that had it said that there will be other occupiers and the other occupiers are, that does change things slightly for us. But let's stick to this particular case here. So we have a third party show up who's not mentioned on the lease, who's not the tenant, who's got no, as far as we know, has absolutely no standing to be here. So the question now becomes, what is the tenant's right? Or rather, what is this third party's right, and what is the landlord's obligation? And when I say landlord, I mean agent as well, obviously. The bottom line is, you do not have an obligation to hand the property over to someone who is not on the lease. Can this be done? Yes, it can. Are you obliged to do this? No, you are not. Now, why I say you can do that, if we take the example, if I were to enter into a lease. So I phone up the agent, I do the application, everything's perfect, happy to hand over to me, money's paid, all of that. But I'm unable to be there on the day due to commitments. And I send my wife and my children. And I say to the agent, oh, my wife will be arriving at 2 o'clock to take the keys, blah, 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 blah. There's no reason for the agent to say, no, I'm not going to give this to your wife, because everything still remains above board. So yes, the agent is legally entitled to give occupation or to give access to somebody who's not the tenant.
Now, in that particular case, would it be acceptable? And I know this is me going OTT here, but with stories like this one sort of things, how do we cover our behinds? Now, if you said your wife would come, is it acceptable to say, can you please pop me an email authorizing your wife to come, give me her full name, her ID, and a copy of her ID book?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
As I say, there's no obligation on the agent to give occupation to this third party.
So they can insist that
they can insist on further steps. They can definitely, because remember, the contract at the end of the day, the contract is between the landlord and the tenant. The landlord must give vacant occupation to the tenant. If the tenant's not there to take occupation, the tenant is not there to fulfill the contract. Now, the landlord gets to say, well, I'm not giving it to anybody else, unless I'm comfortable that the person I'm giving to is indeed you through some measure, whether it be your wife, whether it be your girlfriend, whether it be whoever. So in this particular circumstance, now, this is now not necessarily a legal thing, but it's something that we all know, it's something that we do and can follow. And that's literally your gut. If you feel uncomfortable, you have to take further steps. Because just with experience of having been in this industry long enough, you get a feel that something isn't 100%. And then you are allowed to ask for further information to find that security for your landlord. Because remember, if you don't do that, if you as the agent hand that property over to someone that you know is not the tenant, and you have no reason to believe is acting on behalf of the tenant, whether this be through fraud or anything else, then you are putting yourself in the firing line when that landlord says, why did you give the property to this person? This is not the person on the lease. So yes, 100%. If the tenant cannot move in or the tenant cannot take access and they're sending somebody else, then you can take any steps necessary. I want an email. I want a video call with you when handing the key over to this third party, so that I know you see who they are and I'm giving the key to them. You can take whatever steps are necessary, because as I say, there's no legal obligation to hand that property over to someone who is not on the lease.
Together with this, something else that was bothering me when I listened to this is that normally when people arrive, we're doing our entry inspection and we are then handing over the keys. And no mention was made of entry inspection here, so it might, I assume it wasn't done beforehand. But now let's say something like this happens and legitimately you send your wife. Can we do an entry inspection with your wife who's not a signatory to the lease? What are the implications of that? Because it says very clearly in the Rental Housing Act, a joint inspection with the tenant must be done. Now, I don't know how strictly we have to read that.
Okay. So the way that works is, again, you have the process of agency. Remember, estate agents, managing agents, rental agents, these are all terms that, as of now, we've made up in order to use. Because your legal definition is a property practitioner. So your Rental Housing Act says the landlord and the tenant to do an incoming inspection. 99% of the time, if there's an agent involved, your landlord's not going to be there.
Mhm.
Your agent's going to be there,
But we have a mandate
but you have a mandate.
that permits that.
Do you have a written mandate? Do you have a verbal mandate? Now,
Well, I
Sean,
hope.
you and I both insist there should be a written mandate.
Yes.
But we know that there are many agents moving around with a verbal mandate.
Yeah.
I am fully entitled to say to my wife, go to the property, take access, do the inspection. She becomes my legal agent for that particular purpose.
Okay.
So
And you
I,
are
as a
bound by
tenant,
by
yes,
her actions.
I am now bound by her action. Again, if and this is very important where the agents are doing their homework. If we will be handing the key over at 2 p.m. on the 1st. If the tenant is saying, I can only be there at 5 o'clock, my wife will be there. Who is your wife? Please provide us with a copy of her ID. Please give us her phone number. We will be calling you. Have you given her permission to do the incoming inspection on your behalf? Let's get these things out of the way. It can be done on a message, it can be done on an email. Let's get it out of the way so that we do not find ourselves in a position where the tenant gets to say, I wasn't there. Or the landlord says, why did you give this person occupation of my premises?
Because in the end, we're the filling in the sandwich, and fingers always get pointed from both directions at us. So I always say we hope for the best, but we prepare for the worst.
100%. 100%.
Sorry, I interrupted you there, but that was niggling at me, that ingoing.
No, of course.
Because the other thing about the ingoing inspection, and I'm in this particular case, they put the furniture, they allowed them to put the furniture in, okay? And we can unpack that soon. But the ingoing inspection says very clearly, it must be done prior to them moving in. And that's what the law says. It has to be done prior to them moving in or taking occupation, I think the wording is.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Now, in this particular case, I would not have let them put their furniture into the premises.
But I also understand when it was a female agent, and I'm not being sexist before somebody complains to SAHRC. It's a female agent. There's these people there that have arrived, and you're flummoxed. You've got to think on your feet all of a sudden, and we're human beings. I mean, even agents are
correct.
We can be difficult, but sometimes we also we're just so confused that we allow these things, and I understand it.
Yeah, Sean, we do understand it, but also we're a bit thankful for this because, as I say, I would have preferred she not let them put their furniture in. I would have preferred that we not do any of this. Sorry, Sean, I'm getting a message here. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but Johanna Bixpeller would like to join our session here. Could I send the link on to them?
Yes, you can.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just do this.
It's a bit late. You should have got it yesterday.
Okay, yeah, that should sort that out. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Where was I? Oh, yes. So I would have preferred if they not put the furniture into the premises. But as you correctly say, she was a bit flummoxed. She's got this truck standing here with all these things. She's got this person saying all of these things. But this has also created a scenario for us to discuss here today.
Yes.
So everybody listening to this now knows this is not the first time you're going to see. If it should happen, I hope it doesn't happen to anybody here. But if it does happen, you get to say, but we've had training on this.
Yeah.
I'm not letting you unload that truck. You're not putting anything. I'm not giving you access. I'm not giving you the key. I need to know where this tenant is. Have the tenant contact me. Have the tenant come and take occupation himself. If he doesn't do that, I'm not handing over. Because as I say, there's no legal obligation to provide access nor occupation to anyone that is not the tenant. So do not do that. In fact, I would go so far as to say you don't even need to give occupation to an occupier mentioned on the lease, because
Okay.
your contract is not with the occupier. The occupier falls under the contract of the tenant. Remember that. The occupier
Okay.
falls under the contract of the tenant. The occupier is not paying the rental. The occupier is not maintaining the property. The occupier is not responsible for anything. It's the tenant who remains responsible, who has rights and duties. And the tenant is allowed to have the occupiers occupy with them. And that's the difference.
So
That's
the
the big
occupier
difference.
has to go hand in hand with the tenant.
Correct.
Yeah.
The
Or we
occupier
can
goes
insist
hand
on
in
that.
hand. We can
Look,
insist on that.
if the situation was different, for example, and the occupier was with the tenant at the viewing, and was on the application and all that sort of thing, I think the situation would have felt different in terms of the gut feel.
100%.
And one thing, I know the gut feel is not a legal defense or legal reasoning, but I think that people who are in this business have the gut feel. And if your gut feels funny, and I'm not talking about because you ate something funny, but if your gut feels funny and you've got a bad gut feel, then I always say the universe is talking to you because you're not feeling this for nothing.
Yes. You see, what I would like everybody to walk away with at the end of the session is, what are the rights and the duties in a
Yes.
situation like this?
Yeah.
The right of the landlord is to have his tenant there paying rental. The right of the tenant is to be handed the property. If the landlord agent, if that party is comfortable that I am handing this property to my tenant, then the contract is fulfilled. If, however, there is some suspicion that this is not the tenant, do not hand over until that suspicion has been lifted. Because in not handing over, you are not breaching your duties as a landlord. There is no comeback where the tenant or the occupier gets to say, you should have given me occupation. And you as the agent / your landlord are completely protected in law. And that is what important. So we're not saying
this could have been
that
much worse. I mean,
it could have been.
but they could have refused to take the furniture out.
That's why I'm insisting, in a situation, I would prefer that the furniture not be put in.
The member has popped me a WhatsApp, okay, to remain anonymous, obviously, and said that we let them put the furniture in because what if we were wrong? But from what you are pulling apart now, it doesn't actually matter if we were wrong. The reality is it's not the tenant there. Now, I know that's very hard to do when you are there, you're all alone, you've got the stranger who might be twice your size, probably throwing a tantrum, those things happen. But this could have ended up in an eviction case.
It could very well have ended up in an eviction case. Because yes, I understand what you're saying. What if we were wrong? And that is a valid concern. But that's again why we are having the session, Sean. Because we are telling everyone to not give them occupation, to not allow them to offload, would not have been wrong.
I mean, that's exactly why I WhatsApp you immediately, because I thought to myself, but wait, can we really, I've never faced this before, can we really refuse them to move in when they say that they were sent by this person? And that was what was worrying me.
I mean, consider this.
Yes,
Consider this. It's a legal contract that needs to be fulfilled between two parties. One providing the premises, one taking occupation of the premises. This is no different legally than I owe you money. So, Sean, I owe you 100 Rand.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I'm going to pay you on Thursday. I say I'll pay you on Thursday. Thursday comes along and Mr. Eagle down the street shows up at my door and says, Sean sent me to fetch the 100 rand. If I pay him, have I fulfilled my contract? In my mind, I might think, oh, well, Sean sent him, I've given the 100 rand, debt paid. 2 hours later, Sean knocks on my door and says, where's my money? How do I then defend myself by saying, but I paid Mr. Eagle? Unless I've got a signed letter or Sean's on the phone with me saying, oh, Mr. Eagle's at the door. Do you mind just giving him the money? I'm seeing him later this afternoon. I should protect myself. So our agents and our landlords need to protect themselves. Do not give occupation unless you are certain the person you are giving it to is indeed your tenant. Let's say that they had turned away the tenant, or in the next scenario, we do turn this occupier away.
Okay.
And then 2 hours later, or the next day, or let's say within the same day, the tenant then shows up and says, why did you not let them take occupation? You are not fulfilling your contract. It's simple. So, oh, thank you for coming. Take occupation.
Yeah, because
you are now here. We will fulfill our contract with you.
Yeah, and it gets technical, but the point is it could have been so much worse.
It could have been so
now,
much
the members
worse.
mentioned here as well about verifying who the person is that is applying. And this member has particularly said this. By verify, I don't mean, because obviously they've lived this, so they've thought about it more than us. By verify, I don't mean ID on TPN. I mean, is the person whose documents you have, and this is all in capitals, the same person who you are speaking to? The only way, the member says, to verify this is to ask them to send a photo of themselves holding up their ID. Banks do it, medical aids do it. That's the new way. Your thoughts on that?
Nothing wrong with doing that. Absolutely nothing wrong with doing that.
Is it not OTT?
Unfortunately, we're getting to a position where it's not.
Life is OTT.
Yes, because there are so many things that could go wrong.
There's a lot of these scams going on.
There's a lot of scams going around. There's a lot of these things going around. We might be getting to a point where this becomes necessary. We do hold the other benefit, though. We hold the benefit where we are not selling a product that we are shipping off, that we do not know who we are providing it to. There are certain protections built into the system. In other words, our incoming inspection, the handover of the key. If we get there and this person is clearly not who applied, don't give them occupation. Do not give them occupation because you have no legal duty to do so. And in that, you have protected your landlord.
You mentioned something, and I think that's very useful. If somebody else arrives, okay, and it sounds very practical to me. Somebody else arrives, and the other person has given them the permission, theoretically. But now remember that nobody has seen this other person. Nobody has seen this applicant. The closest they've come to seeing this applicant, and this is not necessarily unusual, no? I mean, it's slightly unusual, but not totally. It's not out of this world unusual. Nobody's actually seen this person. They've seen the ID, and they've spoken to the person on the phone, I assume. But this person has made sure to be more than an arm's distance away, so nobody gets to see them. The thing about giving them a video call and getting them on the video. Oh, by the way, are we allowed to record things without people's permission in this country?
It's a gray area. It's a gray area. Rather inform them. Inform them you are recording it, and if they don't want you to, there's your red flag.
But we can do the video call. We can see them. Okay. We can have their ID. We can check. I know this is sounding all over the place. And we can then get them to identify that these are the people that they've authorized us to hand the keys to, and that can do the ingoing inspection. That sounds reasonably practical to me. And then make a note.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct. We have to be certain of what we are doing. That's the bottom line. We have to be certain of what we are doing. And if, again, it's rather practical and logical. If I'm not going to take occupation, I should suspect whoever I send is not going to be given occupation. And therefore, I need to call up my agent and say, oh, I'm sending my wife, I'm sending my son, I'm sending whoever it is that I'm sending, this is the person. You know, I mean, drop your car at the dealership for a service and then send your neighbor to go pick up the car. They're not going to release the car because they don't know who that person is. If you call and say, oh, I'm sending Sean to pick up my car, this is his number. Or, you know, Sean, take a copy of my ID with you, or whatever the case may be, there needs to be reasonable steps taken. Because if you do not take those reasonable steps and you just think, oh, well, somebody's here, let me give them the key because I got to get to another viewing, you as the agent find yourself in the firing line. Why did you hand over my property?
And I think that's the crux of it. We've got to think, but what if?
Yes.
Let's say this happened, they let them move in because they didn't react quickly, they didn't get the gut feel. Then the landlord's got an illegal occupant. And all of a sudden, money stops coming in because that's normally what will happen.
Yep.
The money stops coming in. Who's then going to be in the poo-poo? It ain't going to be, it's not that person.
You see, even now, remember, as much as we say a gut feel is not a legal definition, it's also not a legal defense. And what I mean by that is the agent doesn't get to say to the landlord later, but I didn't feel anything was wrong.
Yeah, my gut was perfectly fine.
I was fine.
I felt good. I liked the person.
Fine. I didn't feel anything was wrong. I signed up with Mr. X and, you know, Miss Y showed up and I thought, oh, well, somebody's here. Must be the person. I gave them the key. Everything felt fine. No, your landlord gets to say, but that's not who filled in the application. Why is this person here? And you as the agent then find yourselves in a very, very precarious situation.
Well, I mean, we can be in the firing line, and in terms of the Consumer Protection Act, my understanding is, and I think it's a Consumer Protection Act, that if we create losses through something that we do or don't do, the landlord can technically sue us to or insist that we make them good.
Yes, remember, besides the Consumer Protection Act, you've also got to deal with the PPRA.
I mean, this is flipping expensive.
Yeah, you as the agent are deemed to have a certain level of expertise.
Yes.
And you have a fiduciary duty to your landlord. You need to protect your landlord's interests through using your knowledge and your
experience,
your expertise. And if you don't use that, if you just think, oh, well, the person's here, therefore they must be the correct person, you haven't fulfilled your duty to your tenant or to your landlord. And before you know it, you're having to pay out losses. And this is not a position we want any of our agents to be sitting in.
Somebody's made a comment and saying one way I protect myself is I never send out an application form unless the client physically comes and views the property. And I hear that and I understand it and I support it. However, and I apologize to the person if they're going to take this the wrong way, some of us live in places where people are moving to. And this particular incident happened in the greater Cape Town area. And we all know a lot of people move here, okay? So it's not uncommon for people to say, listen, I'm moving down to Cape Town. I need to get a place. I'm going to send someone to look at it for me. Now, what often happens in that particular case is that the person then arrives, and I've had this happen more than once to me, and says, oh, no, this isn't what I thought it was. So if something like that happens, I mean, obviously it's a practical thing. We're trying to get the property rented. We update our landlord. We explain the situation to our landlord because that's what covers our behind. But also, I then put a special condition or something in to say that the person acknowledges they haven't looked at the property, but so-and-so did look on their behalf and they have accepted the property as is. Because I've had it happen too many times, and I think it's 2 or 3 times, but that's too many, where the person then arrives and it's like, oh no, this isn't what I thought. No, this isn't child safe. This isn't what. No, if you send somebody, you've got to live by their decision. That's not a get out of jail free card.
No, not, we can take it one step further than that. So if I go back many, many, many years to when I was young and bright-eyed and in law school, we were taught a lovely Latin phrase, cariep subscriptor, which basically means signatory beware. You
Okay.
don't have to send someone to view a property. I can look at pictures online, say, I like it, send me the lease. Sign the lease, pay the deposit, show up on the day and say, but this is not what I thought it was. If what is being presented to me when I arrive is where the pictures were taken, I am bound.
Okay.
Obviously, if the landlord had sent pictures of a lovely mansion in Bantry Bay, and when I showed up, it was a bachelor flat in Woodstock, well, that's not the same thing.
Yes.
But if I saw the bachelor flat in Woodstock, signed the lease, showed up and said, oh, but I don't quite like it. It's not the color that I thought it was, or it's too small, or it's not child safe. I took that risk. And my landlord and my agent are completely protected because I signed without having done my own homework. So yes, we can see it's perfectly legal to send someone else to view the property. It's perfectly legal to sign without having seen the property. But the risk lies with the person who takes that risk.
Is it then good to put something in the special conditions to make this clear? I mean, I know you know the Latin phrase, and now we don't know it, but we know what it means. But you know what people are like. And I'm not being rude when I say not everybody thinks of repercussions or consequences. Unfortunately, there's lots of adults that have authority to sign, but don't seem to understand that there's consequences that go with that. So to put something to highlight the fact, because if we end up somewhere, then I can say, but wait, I warned them, here it is in the lease. They didn't view, but they accept it as is.
Yes, 100%. You can, by all means, I would encourage, put it in.
Yeah.
Point it out to them. You confirm you have not viewed, but you accept the lease as it is. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Pass the responsibility to the party that needs to carry that responsibility.
So now let's come back to this particular situation. Okay. Now the person has arrived. We've now listened to you. The person, a person arrives. It's not that person. The other person refuses to get on a video call with us. Okay, because I think that would be how this story would have played out, because this person was obviously somehow hiding themselves. And we don't feel good about it. And we say, sorry, you can't move in. Okay, klar. Now, there's something that we haven't touched on. The first month's rent has been paid and the deposit has been paid. Is this, because we're now in a very gray area, has this lease now been cancelled? There hasn't been any discussion about that. So how do we neatly tie this thing up so we can now re-rent it? Because at the moment, aren't we in a legal no man's land because it's been promised to somebody who we don't know who they are?
Yes. So what we would do in a situation like this, we would not give them occupation. We would not allow them to unload their things. But we've got the first month's rent.
Yes.
Which means that the tenant can take occupation anytime in this first month because they've paid for the first month. And we say, thank you for the money.
They've just got to arrive.
Yeah, when you arrive, we will hand you occupation. They don't arrive. And we sit back. We do not cancel this lease. Remember, at this point, we do not have grounds to cancel the lease. Because again, I'm not going to say every lease, but most leases will have a provision that the lease will only come into effect upon the first month's rent and the deposit having been paid and the lease being signed, and so on and so on. It doesn't make provision that they must take occupation for the lease to come into effect.
And I remember in a
And
previous session, you've talked about somebody can rent a property just as a backup plan.
yes, and that's
And
why
there's
I would
nothing we
never
can do about it.
recommend that the lease say they must take occupation for the lease to come into effect. Because remember, if they don't take occupation, but we've got the rental, neither our landlord nor ourselves as an agent are suffering any damage.
Not
Our
yet.
landlord's getting paid, we're taking our commission. So we're fine. When we get to the second month, if they still haven't taken occupation, they also haven't paid the rental. But we've got the deposit.
Yeah.
Demand your rental, 20 days, cancel your lease, use a deposit to cover yourselves for that month and find a new tenant.
Okay, so at this point in time, the agent is in a holding pattern.
Yes.
Let's say that happened the 1st of April. Let's assume that's when it happened. I mean, let's say it was the 1st of April. I think it was the 1st of April because it was sort of last month. This happened. Now we've got the rental, nobody's out of pocket, etc., but they don't pay this month. Now, in this case, the agent gave the deposit and everything back. Okay, and I understand why, but we didn't have to, did we?
No, we didn't have to. But remember, in this particular situation, the agent and the tenant, whoever this person may be, had spoken and said, come and fetch your things.
Yes.
Pay all my money back.
Yes.
I'll pay you money when you come and fetch. That's the end. That's the termination of the lease there. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, in this particular circumstance.
But I heard the member say that they paid the deposit back. I don't think they paid the first month's rent back.
Okay, I might have also misheard that. But technically, this lease now came to an end. This lease came to an end because we paid you money back. You collected your things. There's nothing here.
Can one, if a tenant says that to us, or an imaginary tenant, whoever they are, can we say the only way to legally cancel this lease is, no, we can't, as early termination?
We could, but we don't want to go down that road because, as I said, your gut is not a legal finding. We assume that there is some measure of fraud involved here.
Well, there's at least something that doesn't smell right.
It doesn't feel right at all.
Yeah.
Not to you, not to me, not to anybody that listened to that clip. There's definitely something funny going on here.
But as the member said in that, looking back, you see these things. But while you're in it, it's happening incrementally. And this is how these Adams get away with things, because they're so clever. Little bits, and nothing in itself.
It all builds up.
Yeah.
But even there, if I were to put on my purely attorney's hat, and you were to say to me, was this fraud? My only answer is, I do not know. I do not have enough information. To put on my layman's hat or my logical hat, this definitely sounds like fraud.
Yeah, I mean,
but from a purely legal point of view, yes, from a purely legal point of view, I do not know. We would need to prove with much further information that definitely they used somebody else's information to apply for this. They were indeed committing some sort of fraud. Because if that's the case, if we can, at that moment there, if we can say, this is fraud, you applied on somebody else's documents, on somebody else's identity, then this lease never came into effect.
Oh, but then I can't get the first month's rental either.
Oh, but you can.
Oh, I can. Okay.
You can, because through your actions, I'm suffering loss because I couldn't find the tenant.
Okay.
And therefore, I'm holding the rental. Okay.
I've recalled something while it helps when we unpack these things. TPN has a product, and when you're talking, I'll see if I can find it. They have a product where you can send a link to an applicant. They have to take a selfie, and you can submit that selfie, which will identify them. I'm just thinking about that now. There is a product out there like that. I was just thinking, because last night I had to move money and then the FNB wanted to look at me, and somehow I haven't aged because FNB still recognizes me. But the thing, there is something like that. So that could be where you have this feel. But we don't have the feel at the beginning. That's the
We
problem.
don't have the feel at the beginning. What I'm saying is if we know, not assume, not feel, but know that this person is not who applied, there was no lease. And then we can immediately market that property because there was no lease. That person had no right to occupation, and we can start looking for a new tenant immediately. However, if we don't know this for certain, then we have to hold this property for the tenant, whoever they may be. And when that tenant comes to take occupation, we must give them occupation. If they don't come to take occupation, the second that lease is breached, by that second month's rental not being paid, send the demand, cancel 20 days later, get a new tenant in there. Now, if they haven't come to take occupation within that first month, they're unlikely to come anytime in that second month. You start marketing, your demand's going to run. As soon as it expires, there's no need for an eviction because they're not in occupation. You find a new tenant and you put the new tenant in. But we can only do this if we are unsure. If we are sure that they're not the tenant, fraud, no lease, that's the end of it.
Yeah, but being sure is not easy in this circumstance.
Being sure is not easy. Being sure is not easy.
Another question that I wanted to ask was, they paid all this money in cash. Okay. And I don't say there's anything wrong with cash, except most of us don't walk around with that sort of amount. And I'm not sure what the rental is, but a deposit and first month's rent is a lot of cash. Doesn't matter what amount it is. There is, in the FICA legislation, there's this thing about suspicious transactions that we have to report. Okay. Now, two things here. There's a cash threshold of 49,999 or something like that. I think there is. If they pay cash of over that amount, then we have to immediately report it's a reportable suspicious something. I always had the argument, which doesn't work, but I convinced myself it did at the time, that if they pay to the bank, it's the bank's problem to FICA them. Okay, but that is evidently is not really how it works. It's still my problem because they're my client, they're not the bank's client. And so I still have to report them because they paid more than 49,999 Rand in cash. That's the one thing. But now in this case, it's probably not 49,999 Rand. But if somebody is paying cash every month for their rental, is that suspicious?
Okay. So previously, I mean, let's go back 12 months, a bit more than 12 months. If somebody brought you cash, I mean, even 10,000 Rand in cash, you had to report it to FIC.
Okay.
If they paid it into the bank, to an account, 25,000, I think at the time, they paid 25,000 to the bank. The bank had to report them to FIC. You would not need to. Because the money wasn't paid to you, the money was paid to the bank. The rules have now changed. If they pay it to the bank needs to report them, but the money's coming to your account, you need to report them as well. So as the agent, you would need to still report them to FIC. However, again, if the money is paid via EFT from one bank account to another, under the current regulations regarding FIC, if it deems to be suspicious for any reason, you need to report it to FIC. Not only if it's a cash amount. It doesn't matter where the money comes from. If you know that this person sends you a payslip, they work as a bank teller, and they send you a pay slip, they're earning 15,000 Rand a month. I don't know what bank tellers earn, but let's call it 15,000 Rand a month. But they're paying you 45,000 Rand a month in rental. You have to report it to FIC.
Okay.
As soon as there is some suspicion, it has to be reported. So in this particular circumstance, the suspicion was not on the amount of money. The suspicion was the bank statements sent were from X account, the money came from Y account, I now need to refund the money to B account. That creates suspicion there. And this member correctly got the necessary information and reported it to FIC, as was her duty. So she's done the right thing.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. 2 people have confirmed with me in the chat that yes, there is a service from TPN where you can do the selfie thing. And also just a reminder that if you don't have these services, you can also get verified bank statements directly through TPN as well. I'm not promoting TPN. I'm just telling you that these services are available for those that need to do it. The member said FICA is a beautiful thing. This is the member that left the voice note. It is. It is a beautiful thing, and it's a major plus for us to promote our services, because these are the sorts of stories, ladies and gentlemen, not just to be aware of and to know how to act when they happen. These are the fireside stories that you tell people when they are asking you, and when you're meeting with them about listing their property. You tell them these stories. You tell them these stories, and you say to them, you hate it when somebody wants to FICA you, but do you understand we have an obligation to FICA? So Mr. and Mrs. Potential Landlord, you get somebody who sees your property on Facebook Marketplace. We all know they die over here somewhere by Philippi when they go fetch their TVs, no? But those things happen. So can you imagine? You see that person, they give you an ID. You know how often IDs don't correlate with Home Affairs, because we check with the Home Affairs database, which is actually what we do, etc., etc. You taking pity off the street, or whoever off the street, you don't know who they are, and you tell them these stories. That's how we get the business. Because we need to make, I always say that I have two processes when I'm trying to list a property. Point number 1, I try and make them so scared of doing it themselves. Okay, because you tell them all the bad stuff that can happen, but how you can prevent it and how you do prevent it. So this is one of the reasons these things help us get business. Anything else, Ishmael? I'm surprised we have managed to speak a whole hour about this, but there's so many things here, and these are the things that the only place we get this sort of training, and we pull these things apart, either when you have the problem. Okay. And fortunately, this member was kind enough to share the problem with us so that we could discuss it, so that we know in future, but wait, we are allowed to do this. Yes, I can tell you, it's not happening. You're not, don't even take your furniture out of the van, because it's not going in that house. Klar.
Correct. It's like I always say to clients, I say, this is not my first rodeo, because chances are I've come across something similar, or I've been involved in something similar before. And again, that's the benefit of these sessions, because having seen it before, or when one of the listeners has come across a scenario, we get to put it out to everyone else. So then it becomes not your first rodeo.
Yeah.
And you don't have to sit and think, what do I do? Think, I know what I'm supposed to do because I've had training on this, and this is what we're going to do.
And that's why sometimes these training sessions are there to sensitize us to figure out when something does look fishy, smell fishy, feel strange. And then contact Sean or whatever. And Ishmael is very, very, very amenable to if something like this happens, as it did, then I'm thinking, but can we refuse them? I mean, my gut feel says yes, but just now I end up in jail, no? And then I just pop Ishmael a WhatsApp, and then he comes back to me, and then I'm like, okie dokie, yep, you can refuse them, you can insist on this, and that's all part of the benefits of the membership. Is there any any key things you want to highlight yet? To me, from what I've gathered, and I'm learning in the same program, I've never actually had this happen, but I know more than 10 years ago, when I was managing an office in Fisher, we did have a situation where somebody was moving from Joburg, blah, 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 and the house, the agent met the people at the house, but these people arrived at the house with a moving truck and they paid a deposit to somebody. And this was a slightly different, but it wasn't us. And they had a whole moving truck and they'd come all the way from Joburg, you know, and you feel terrible saying to them, well, I'm sorry, but it's not my problem.
And
And
unfortunately, it's not your problem. It's
unfortunately,
they've been scammed, and
fortunately,
there's not
that
much you can do.
wasn't our problem, but that agent also let them put the furniture in because they felt sorry for them. And despite the fact, you know, I sometimes say that I was born a BI whatever, but even I have my weak moments when you stand there and you think, oh, shame. But every time we think, oh, shame, and we be nice, it bites you in the bum. It always bites us in the bum.
Yes, unfortunately. Nice guys finish last.
Yes. Ishmael, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, did you learn something this morning? Do you like these, by the way, do you like these case studies? To me, it's like taking things and making them.
Sorry, I need to cut you off there, but I do need to log off. I've
fully
got to
understand.
get onto a few other things. I know we've managed to pull it on to 10 o'clock this time. We'll give a few more minutes the next time, but thank you, everybody.
No, it's perfectly fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good day. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, yes, it seems like people have found benefit. These are the situations, you know, in rentals. I often say, sometimes it feels a little, I'm thinking eensaam, lonely, because we all work in our own little bubble, don't we? And there's often not a lot of cross-pollination, so to speak. And so learning from other people's situations, and even if it just sensitizes you to say, you know what? Oh, if something happens in future, this is how I can prevent it. And I think that's so useful. And these are not the sort of things that we generally do publicly for lots of reasons, mainly because I don't even think people would want to pay for something like this. But Googie, you're right. It's an eye-opener. It's an eye-opener because unless we've experienced it, it's very difficult to even. I think sometimes you can't even imagine these things happen. You think to yourself, but wait, is this the world I live in? And so it's so difficult. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad I'm getting positive feedback. I'm glad you found this beneficial. What I am going to, I promised that from this month we will do a landlord newsletter. I'm going to try and put together a newsletter. Bernadine, you did email me about a previous newsletter. This time I will upload the newsletter to where the recordings are. By the way, regarding recordings, I got behind. I now fortunately have a lady helping me, and I've been pushing her very hard this week. And I believe the recordings should all be uploaded, and they should now be uploaded within a day or two, because it's not reliant on me anymore. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. We do appreciate your business and your membership. And to those that are new, I hope this was an exciting first live. And all I'm going to say now is have a great day and have a lekker weekend. And we'll see you soon. Bye for now.